Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from the Zambia police service say that one of their own officers found himself behind bars last week after he freed more than a dozen inmates from a local police station, something he allegedly did because he wanted them to be able to enjoy the New Year's holiday. The whole thing started at around 10 a.m. on December 31st, when the officer in question, Detective Inspector Titus Piri, was on duty at the Leonard Chilo police station in the capital of Lusaka. Despite the early hour, it appears that Piri was already in quite the festive mood. According to reports, he was hitting the alcohol pretty hard. Not only that, but he was determined to make sure he wasn't the only one having a good time. After forcibly taking the keys from one of his fellow officers, Piri headed into the prisoner holding area. He then allegedly began unlocking the cell doors, telling the inmates that they could leave and that they were, quote, free to cross over into the new year. 13 of the 15 people in custody managed to escape the building before Piri fled himself, presumably to continue his celebrations elsewhere. By the time the situation was reported to higher-up officials, several hours had apparently passed, and all of the escaped inmates were long gone. According to local news sources, the suspects were in custody for a variety of offenses, including assault, robbery, and burglary. At the time of this recording, it seems that the only person authorities have been able to track down is Piri himself. He was quickly arrested over the stunt on charges of aiding suspects to escape from lawful custody. Currently, a manhunt is ongoing to try and find the 13 missing inmates. Police in the Republic of Ireland released a disturbing update in the death of a 31-year-old mother this week, announcing days after her body was found inside of her home that the case is now being treated as a murder. The whole thing began at around 10:30 a.m. on January 3rd, when police in County Cork received an unsettling 999 call. The unknown caller stated that a woman was harming herself inside of an apartment in the town of Mallow, and that she had just slashed both of her wrists with a knife. When officers arrived at the top floor unit in question, they were greeted by an awful sight. The resident there, 31-year-old mother of two, Paula Canty, was dead on the floor, and there was blood all over the place. While the death would have been tragic under any circumstances, as police began investigating, they quickly noticed discrepancies between what the 999 caller had told them and what they found at the scene. For starters, Paula did not have any injuries to her wrists, and instead had been killed by a knife wound to the chest. Other suspicious discoveries soon followed. Authorities determined that Paula had already been dead for some time before she was found, and CCTV helped them to further narrow the timeline, showing that she had been alive the previous evening. They concluded that not only had Paula been murdered, but that the murder had likely happened several hours before the 999 emergency call was made. Though few other details have been released about the investigation at this time, police say that they have since zeroed in on a prime suspect. This person's name has not yet been released, though authorities have stated that it's a man that was known to Paula. In the aftermath of the terrible announcement, friends and family members flooded to pay their respects to Paula online and share their grief over what had happened. According to those close to the 31-year-old, she led a hard and often chaotic life. She was frequently in trouble with the law, having racked up more than 100 convictions for crimes including theft, drug possession, robbery, and burglary, though loved ones say she was a kind woman and a devoted mother. At the time of her murder, she was just days away from celebrating her 32nd birthday. Currently, the investigation into the crime continues. Authorities in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh are investigating the aftermath of an equally chilling and perplexing case this week, after a man allegedly murdered his own mother and 4 sisters with the help of his father, a crime which so far has no clear motivation. The disturbing situation began sometime on the morning of January 1st, when police in the city of Lucknow made an awful discovery at the Hotel Sharanjit, located in the city's Naka area. Inside of room 109, they found the bodies of 5 women. The victims were all determined to be members of the same family. A mother named Asma and her 4 daughters, 19-year-old Alshia, 18-year-old Ramin, 16-year-old Aksa, and 9-year-old Aliyah. All 5 of the women had been strangled, and their throats and wrists had also been slashed with a knife. Police didn't have to search far for the alleged culprit. The brother and son of the victims, 24-year-old Mohammed Arshad, turned himself in and was the one that had alerted them to the crime in the first place. After launching an investigation, authorities determined that Arshad and the victims had checked into the hotel on December 30th, after arriving in the city the previous day from their home in Agra. They had traveled there under the guise of meeting with a local official. However, police now believe this was all part of a ruse meant to lure the victims to their deaths. On the evening of December 31st, police say that Arshad went out and purchased food, drinks, and alcohol, which he laced with sleeping pills. After his mother and sisters consumed the items and passed out, it's alleged that he murdered them. Though all of this was pieced together fairly quickly by authorities, it appears the case is far from straightforward. For starters, it's alleged that Arshad's father, 53-year-old Mohammed Badar, helped both to plan and carry out the killings. However, his whereabouts are currently unknown. The motive behind the crime is also something police are apparently struggling with. Arshad reportedly gave numerous and conflicting stories about what happened and why, none of which really make a whole lot of sense. Case in point, a nearly 7-minute video which Arshad reportedly shared with other relatives shortly after the killings. In it, the 24-year-old claimed that he and his family were being harassed by neighbors who were part of an organized crime group that were attempting to take over their land and sell his sisters into the sex trade. Bizarrely, Arshad suggested in the video that he and his father killed the rest of the family to protect them, and that they believed they were going to be framed for other crimes. Investigators have said that they do not believe there is any truth to Arshad's claims, and that there doesn't appear to have been any animosity between the family and their neighbors. In fact, locals say that Arshad and Badar barely spoke to other residents in the area. On top of this, police stated that they believe Arshad's video was pre-recorded and that he and his father had been planning on committing the murders for some time. As for other possible motives, some local news sources state that Badar was an abusive husband and father and had frequently been violent towards his wife and daughters in the past. Some of these reports go as far as to suggest that Badar might have convinced his son to carry out the killings and turn himself in so that he could escape and Arshad would take the fall for everything. There are also some sources which mention ongoing tensions in the family in the lead up to the murders over an undisclosed property dispute. At the time of this recording, no definitive conclusions have been reached, and the investigation is still ongoing. Arshad remains in custody while the search for Mohammed Badar continues. Representatives from the New Zealand police say that one of their own officers is dead this week and at least 2 others are injured following a disturbing New Year's Day vehicle ramming attack. The situation unfolded shortly after 2 a.m. on January 1st when New Zealand police were carrying out patrol duties in the city of Nelson. A group of officers were on foot around Buxton Square, where New Year's celebrations had wrapped up about an hour before, when they decided to do a routine check of a nearby parking lot. They were in the middle of that check when suddenly things took a horrifying turn. Out of nowhere, a man in a vehicle deliberately drove into the officers at high speed. After hitting 2 of them, the man turned around and slammed into a patrol car with another officer inside, before fleeing the scene. While the man was caught and arrested a short time after all of this happened, unfortunately, the damage was already done. One of the officers who had been hit, 62-year-old Senior Sergeant Lynn Fleming, died from her injuries at a hospital several hours later. The whole thing is especially shocking because crimes like this are exceptionally rare in New Zealand. In fact, Fleming is said to be the first female officer killed in the line of duty in the country's history. According to reports, she was a 38-year veteran of the police force, as well as a beloved wife, mother, and longtime coach with the local high school girls netball team. Thankfully, the other officer directly hit during the attack, Senior Sergeant Adam Ramsey, is said to be recovering and is expected to pull through. The third officer, who was in the patrol car that was hit, suffered a concussion but has reportedly since been discharged from the hospital. As for the suspect, so far he has only been identified as a 32-year-old man from Tasman District. His name is currently the subject of an interim suppression order, though it seems this will likely be lifted sometime after his next court appearance on January 10th. While almost no information has been released about the man's motive or the broader circumstances surrounding the crime, we do know that he is facing 8 charges. The offenses include murder, attempted murder, assault using a vehicle as a weapon, and driving while disqualified. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody. authorities in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul released a disturbing update in connection with the mysterious deaths of 3 people this week, announcing that they no longer believe the situation was a tragic accident and that a family member of the victims has now been arrested on suspicion of their murders. The whole thing began right before the holidays on December 23rd, 2024, in the coastal city of Tôrres. That afternoon, several members of the same family had gathered for some afternoon tea. One of those in attendance, 60-year-old Zeli dos Anjos, had brought a Christmas cake with her, which she had prepared herself at her home in the neighboring municipality of Arroio do Sal. At some point, as everyone was enjoying their tea, Zeli sliced the cake and began passing pieces around. According to reports, it didn't take long before the family members noticed something was off. A couple of them noted that the cake had a strange sort of peppery taste. Unfortunately, by the time anyone spoke up, it was already too late. 6 out of the 7 people there had already eaten part or all of the cake they'd been served. Within hours, all 6 of those who had eaten the cake were hospitalized and had begun experiencing severe vomiting and diarrhea. Sadly, 3 of them died not long after arriving there. They have since been identified as 2 of Zeli's sisters, 58-year-old Maida Flores de Silva and 65-year-old Nusa Silva dos Anjos, as well as Nusa's daughter, 43-year-old Tatiana Silvia dos Santos. Following some tests, it was determined that all of the family members who had either died or gotten sick had been the victims of arsenic poisoning. And given that the only person who wasn't hospitalized hadn't eaten Zeli's cake, it didn't take long for the source of the poison to be linked back to the dessert. A subsequent search of Zeli's home reportedly revealed that the flour she had used to bake the cake had been laced with extremely high levels of arsenic. Now, you might be thinking that Zeli was the one that poisoned her family members, and it appears this is definitely something police initially looked into. However, something didn't quite add up. You see, Zeli was also among the people who were hospitalized. In fact, though she is expected to survive, she reportedly ate more of the cake than anyone. Doctors also revealed that she had the highest amounts of arsenic in her blood test results. While it seems police have not fully ruled out Zeli's involvement, since they say they still need to question her once she is well enough, in the last few days, they have turned their attention towards a different suspect. On January 5th, they revealed that they had arrested Zeli's daughter-in-law in connection with the case, a woman named Deise Moura dos Anjos. Currently, authorities have not revealed much about what led them to Deise, saying that they want to protect the integrity of their investigation. However, they have alleged that Deise's internet search history shows that she was researching arsenic and arsenic poisoning in the lead-up to the crime. Family members have gone further, telling local news outlets that though Deise had been married to Zeli's son for about 20 years, she and her mother-in-law have always had a troubled relationship. They also cited undisclosed recent turmoil within the family, suggesting it had been caused by Deise. Adding another layer of concern to the case is the fact that just 3 months before all of this happened, Zeli's husband also died. At the time, it was thought to be a simple food poisoning case. However, in light of this week's revelations, authorities have ordered for the man's body to be exhumed so that more testing can be done. At the time of this recording, Deise Moura dos Anjos remains in custody on suspicion of aggravated triple homicide, as well as 3 counts of attempted murder. The situation is still developing. If you've been a viewer of this series for a while now, chances are you'll know that Japan has a reputation for taking crime very seriously. However, I have to admit that even with all of the stories I've read about from the country over the years, this next one still caught me by surprise. It all started sometime on September 17th of last year, when a 41-year-old man walked into a supermarket in the city of Sapporo. While browsing the aisles, he picked up a couple packages of ground beef. He then attempted to walk out of the business without paying. All of this was noticed by the store's 56-year-old security guard, who promptly went to stop the man. However, when he did, the suspect shoved him out of the way before he could react and managed to escape. Now, if this took place in North America, Europe, or really anywhere else in the world, this would probably be where the story ended. Unfortunately, the reality is that for most store owners, dealing with shoplifters is just part of the cost of doing business. However, as I'm sure you've already guessed, that's not what happened here. After being alerted to the incident, Sapporo police not only launched an investigation, they spent the next 3 months using the country's extensive CCTV network to track the beef thief. That's how they were ultimately able to arrest him on December 23rd in Chita City in Aichi Prefecture. If this doesn't already sound like going the extra mile, so to speak, allow me to show you where Chita City is relative to Sapporo. By most methods, it's a more than 900-mile journey. I should also point out that these packs of ground beef reportedly cost 184 yen. It's not clear from reports if that's 184 yen each or in total, but that means at most we're talking about like $2.30 US of ground beef here. Imagine if someone stole a Twinkie in New York City and the NYPD chased them to Jacksonville, Florida. That's basically what we're talking about here. While it can certainly be questioned whether this is the best or most productive use of police resources, if you ask me, there's something kind of refreshing about it at the same time. And one thing's for sure, the 41-year-old suspect in this case definitely isn't going to try shoplifting anytime soon. Representatives from Australia's New South Wales Police say that a more than year-and-a-half-long manhunt has come to an end this week, after a man believed to be behind the cold case murder of a young woman nearly 3 decades ago was finally tracked down and arrested. The case began all the way back on the morning of July 18, 1997, when the lifeless body of 25-year-old Megan Louise Rose was found at the base of Point Cartwright Cliffs in the Sunshine Coast suburb of Mooloolaba. Megan had last been seen the previous evening around 8 p.m. when she left the home where she was living with her then partner, 45-year-old Keith Lees, and his adolescent daughter. Following an initial investigation, police didn't believe any kind of crime had been committed. They found Megan's car in a parking lot close to where her body was found, along with a box of wine and an empty glass. They concluded that the young woman had tragically taken her own life. Megan's family, however, were not convinced. They fought for years for her case to be reopened, something that eventually happened in 2022. When the time finally came, suspicions quickly turned to one person in particular, Keith Lees. While authorities have not yet shared a lot of what they were able to uncover during this new investigation, what we do know is that Lees had already served time for another murder by this point. In 2004, he was convicted of murdering a 42-year-old man named Barry Waters and ended up serving 16 years in prison. On top of this, we now know that Lees claimed a $203,000 life insurance policy on Megan following her death in 1997. On June 25, 2023, investigators sat down with Lees in the state of Victoria and interviewed him about Megan's death. He denied any involvement. However, immediately afterwards, he disappeared. The following day, his car was found abandoned in the city of Portland. He was next seen nearly 200 miles away at the Warren Pond Shopping Center buying new clothes. That same day, he was witnessed leaving a train station before he vanished altogether. Though police obtained a warrant for his arrest in connection with the case the next month, it was too late. By that time, he was long gone. The manhunt continued from July of 2023 onwards until this week, when police in New South Wales made a massive breakthrough. They managed to connect Lees to a fake identity in the Sydney suburb of Int'l. He was arrested on January 2nd at the subsidized housing complex where police say he was fraudulently living since November of 2023. After being taken into custody, Lees was charged in connection with the warrant, as well as assaulting a police officer after he allegedly tried to bite one of the officers during his arrest. He is facing further charges related to the use of his fraudulent identity, and is soon expected to face formal charges for Megan's murder. At the time of this recording, he is awaiting extradition to Queensland. People across the tiny Balkan nation of Montenegro have been left shocked and in mourning this week, following a devastating and senseless act of mass violence that left 12 people dead and several others seriously wounded. The situation unfolded at around 5:30 p.m. on January 1st in the town of Cetinje, located about 20 miles from the capital of Podgorica. Several people had gathered at a local bar and restaurant to celebrate New Year's Day when suddenly a brawl erupted inside of the business. While no information has been released about what caused the altercation, we do know that one of the people involved was a 45-year-old man named Eko Martinovic. Martinovic had been drinking heavily all day and had a reputation for violent and erratic behavior. Initially, it seemed like things had cooled off when Martinovic left the restaurant after the argument. Sadly, though, this was not the case. It turned out that the 45-year-old had only gone home to retrieve a weapon. When he returned to the business a short time later, he began shooting indiscriminately at those inside. Horrifyingly, even after gunning down multiple people inside the restaurant, Martinović was far from finished. According to local news sources, he carried out attacks in 4 other places that evening, killing a total of 12 people and wounding at least 4 others. The rampage only came to an end early the following morning after police surrounded the 45-year-old in a neighboring town near his home. That's when he turned his weapon on himself during a standoff with officers. He was pronounced dead while being taken to a hospital. While the names of the victims have not been released at the time of this recording, it's said that almost all of them were known to Martinović. According to unconfirmed reports, among the dead are friends and family members of the 45-year-old, as well as the owner of the restaurant where the shooting began, and his 2 children, ages 10 and 13. As for the wounded victims, all of them suffered severe injuries. 3 are in stable but life-threatening condition, while 1 remains critical. Adding to the tragedy is the fact that this is the second act of mass violence like this to happen in the town of Cetinje in the last few years. If you've been a viewer of this series for a while now, you might remember that back in August of 2022, we told you about another shooting attack in which a 34-year-old man killed 10 people before being fatally shot himself by a bystander. Just like in this week's incident, 2 children were killed during that shooting spree as well. Currently, no real motive behind this most recent crime has been unearthed. As previously mentioned, the shooting happened shortly after the altercation in the restaurant, but the exact circumstances surrounding everything still appear to be unknown. That being said, it has been reported that Martinović had a history of trouble with the law. Local news outlets revealed that the 45-year-old had previously been arrested for domestic violence and had a 2005 conviction for violent behavior. More recently, in 2022, he was convicted of illegal weapons possession. The situation is still under investigation. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, everyone, and take care.